And welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. As you might well be aware, the papacy has launched his crusade from the platform of the United States government. And I'm going to be dealing with the content of that speech and what it implies for America in subsequent broadcasts, where I will focus on it directly and purposefully. But this morning I just want to give some highlights and relate what some of the things that the Pope said in his speech, how it relates to the current reading of the book that we are currently engaged in, The Global Vatican, by former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Francis Rooney. First of all, the papacy tried to assure his listeners that his speech was not political, but that defies common sense. Those who have common sense regarding the papacy, most people don't know much about it at all. But common sense, for those of us who have researched it for years and have some idea and concept what the papacy really is and how it operates in the world, both in history and currently, is that everything that the Pope says has a political significance. Look, whatever the Pope preaches about, whether it is charity toward the Roman Catholic Mexicans that are flooding across the border with Mexico, or the redistribution of the world's wealth, or solidarity or subsidiarity, or any of the various other things that the Pope talked about in his speech, they all have direct political import. Because intrinsic in his speech, and especially when delivered from Congress, the implication is palpable that he's appealing to the political leaders of this country, both left and right, what is morally right. And obviously, it is their job to comply with the Pope's moral standard, and to do so on the behalf of the American citizens. In other words, to make laws consistent with the goals and objectives and teachings of the papacy. Now, to say that the Pope's speech is not intended to be political is absurd on its face, especially when delivered from the very halls of our federal government. And you're going to see this government respond in a political way to all of the things that this Pope talked about. Now, that's enough for now. I don't want to dominate this discussion with a discussion about the Pope's visit. I want to remain focused on this book by Francis Rooney. But weaving within this book, I will make comments related to the Pope's speech to give you a clearer understanding of what bodes for the United States. Now, the same Pope that we saw speak from Congress yesterday is the same papacy that this author is speaking about. So it's pertinent to what we're talking about. Now, remember, we were discussing, still on the subject of the fall of the Soviet Union and the role that the papacy and Roman Catholicism played. The Roman Catholic Church's ability to sway the populace, its exercise of soft power to influence the world. And the implication of this author is, and history bears witness, that the power of the Roman Catholic Church together with the Pope, is enough to topple the Soviet Union. Where nuclear threat wasn't enough, military and economic sanction weren't enough, the Roman Catholic Church was enough. And it all started with John Paul II's visit to Poland and his warming up to the Solidarity trade union led by Lech Walesa in Poland. Now, apply that to the Pope's visit to the United States. He visited Poland, Russia fell. He visited the United States. What might be the outcome? What's the purpose? What's the overall purpose? What is the unstated purpose? Remember, John Paul II tried to assure the government of Poland that it wasn't there for political reasons. He was there to minister to the Roman Catholic masses. He was just doing his job as the spiritual leader of the Roman Catholic Church. Yet, Soviet Russia fell, according to the author, according to history. What might be the untold purpose of the Pope's visit to the United States? Now, we're going to begin in the last full paragraph on page 166, still talking about the fall of the Soviet Union, the influences of the soft power of the Roman Catholic Church and the papacy. He says in 1986, Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev began instituting reforms within the Soviet Union. 3 years later, the revolutions of 1989 broke out across Eastern Europe, first in Poland, then in Hungary, then East Germany, and the Berlin Wall fell in November of 1989. By the end, the outlook turned around so completely in Poland that the government of General Jaruzelski, that is the Soviet government of Poland, was relying on the Polish Church, that is the Polish Roman Catholic Church, to help pacify its people, and therefore effectively admitting that the moral authority of the Roman Catholic Church carried more real power, that is the power to sway people, than all the threats and arms of the government. Now, in the context of what we just read, what is the portent of this Pope's visit to the United States of America that was once Protestant? But by the way, did you happen to notice John Boehner sitting to the upper right of the Pope as he spoke? I mean, this was a religious experience for John Boehner, a politician. He was a blubbering idiot. I mean, he was so swooned by the Pope, you would think it was Jesus Christ himself speaking from that podium. All day long, John Boehner was fighting back tears. His chin was quivering, his eyes were watering, his nose was running, his face was flushed. It was all he could do to contain the emotion. This papal visit to the United States, and especially speech from the podium of the joint session of Congress, was an answer to prayer for John Boehner. Now stop and think about the papacy in the context of what we've always talked about here on First Amendment Radio, on Inquisition Update. That was the Antichrist of the Bible speaking from that podium. Can you conceive in your mind now the incomprehensible apostasy of this nation? Can you now begin to comprehend the potential that might result from this papal visit? Knowing that John Paul II, merely appearing in Poland one time, toppled the Soviet Union? Am I overstating what happened? History bears witness. The American government bears witness. The papacy bears witness. Russia, Mikhail Gorbachev bore witness. Remember the quote at the beginning of this chapter? This was a quote from Mikhail Gorbachev. Listen to what he said. Everything that happened in Eastern Europe would have been impossible without the Pope. What was that everything in Eastern Europe that happened? The toppling of the Soviet Union. Because of the influence, the solidarity of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, if the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church, can overthrow a nation, a government, as big as the Soviet Union, what challenge is it for the United States government? And what reaction did you see on the faces of the American politicians in that congressional hall? Do you see the walls of America tumbling? You can remember the Berlin Wall tumbling. Those of you who were alive at the time. Great emotion all over the world. And what it really spelled was a victory for the Roman Catholic Church. And what suffering must have resulted of the non-Catholic religions, the non-Catholic quote-unquote Christian religions, such as the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia. And what might be the target in the United States can be none other than Protestantism. None other than Protestantism. A victory over Protestantism was the very goal for the establishment of the Jesuit order. It has been the very aim and purpose of the convening of the Council of Trent, to destroy Protestantism. We've talked about the role of futurism and how it resulted in Vatican Council II, an ultimatum to the Protestants. You now believe in a future Antichrist, therefore you've exonerated the papacy, and because of the Protestant Reformation, you overthrew all the power, all the influence, all the land, all the governments of Europe that once served the Pope, now serve you, the people of the Protestant Reform, and now you must restore to the papacy all that he lost. And not only that, with your blood and your guts and your taxpayers, you must mount up on your tanks smart bombs, nuclear bombs, missiles, ships, and conquer the rest of the world for the papacy. You must do it on your own dime. And that's exactly what we've done. And so faithful is the United States to restore the papacy to his former glory in the world, that the Pope thought it an honor to come to this country and to further delude the American people. Antichrist dies hard, and especially when there's no protest. I'm going to deal more with this papal visit in a future broadcast, but suffice it to say right now, we can see from the history related to us in this book the potential of the Roman Catholic Church in Poland and the effect that it had on the other Eastern Bloc nations under Soviet control. What consequence could this visit bode for America? He says, by the end, the outlook turned around so completely in Poland. You can read that, America. The outlook turned around so completely in Poland that the government of General Jaruzelski was relying on the Roman Catholic Church to help pacify the people. Yeah, it was the government then relying upon the Roman Catholic Church. Is the government of the United States going to be relying upon the Roman Catholic Church? And what consequence will it have if it does? I assert that it has been relying upon the Roman Catholic Church for a long, long time. And this reliance upon the Roman Catholic Church in Poland was an effective admission that the moral authority of the Roman Catholic Church carried more real power, the power that is to sway people, than all the threats and arms of the government. Now, in the case of the United States, the threats and arms of the government are not against the papacy as they were in Jaruzelski's Poland. They are for the papacy. And they've been traipsing all over the world, conquering and to conquer for the Pope. The Pope doesn't have to wield a bow. He certainly doesn't need to have a quiver of arrows for his bow when the United States does all the conquering for him. And when you see boots on the ground in the United States of America, you better believe they are fighting for this new world order. They've been fighting for it all along, at your expense. And you are the ultimate target. You Bible-believing Christians, you Protestants who protest the Antichrist, you are the ultimate target. Did you hear the Pope's comments about fundamentalism? That fundamentalism, in words paraphrasing, shouldn't be tolerated wherever it's found? Of course, immediately to you, that meant, well, fundamentalist Islam. Yeah, that's a threat. Terror. It needs to be opposed. But when the Muslim fundamentalists have all been brought to heel, have all been conquered and vanquished by the United States government and its coalition of papal crusaders around the world, who's next? Stop and think. Who are called fundamentalists today in the United States? Bible-believing Christians. Fundamentalist Christians. When you see bombs exploding all over these fundamentalist Muslims, put yourself in their place, because that's where you are intended to be before this crusade is over. You worried about Muslim fundamentalism? You better worry about your own longevity. This crusade is coming to the United States of America. And that's literally why I call Inquisition Update, Inquisition Update. The very name of this program implies what I'm now saying. There's going to be an anti-Protestant crusade. Oh, it's not going to be overtly anti-Protestant. That can't be done in a nation where religious freedom is preached from Congress and from the Pope. You heard him talk about religious freedom, didn't you? But has there ever been religious freedom in the history of the Roman Catholic Church? No. Never, ever, ever. All these peace overtures, all these ecumenical overtures are just cover for the crusade. He says diplomatic relations and routine communication between the United States and the Holy See through those hopeful but anxious days proved quite useful. Open channels of communication via the American ambassadors to the Holy See. First, William Wilson. Now he's admitting they were ambassadors of the United States. William Wilson, then Frank Shakespeare, and later Thomas Malady ensured at the very least that the Holy See and the White House avoided working at cross purposes. In other words, they helped to make sure that the United States and the Vatican were working on the same purposes. Isn't that what this book is all about? It's all about what they accomplished together, this holy alliance between the Roman Catholic Church, the papacy, and the United States government. That's what this book is all about. Now he says, John Paul II's gratitude for Ronald Reagan is evident in a letter he wrote to Nancy Reagan upon the former president's death in 2004, shortly before his own death. Quote, I recall with deep gratitude the late president's unwavering commitment to the service of the nation and to the cause of freedom, as well as his abiding faith in the human and spiritual values which ensure a future of solidarity, justice, and peace in the world. What does all that mean? It means the overthrow, the apparent, at least, overthrow of atheist communism, a victory of the Roman Catholic Church, which the world erroneously, to their own detriment, regards as Christianity. Okay? You still celebrate the fall of the Berlin Wall? If you do, you're celebrating the fall of Protestantism in this country, because that's where it's heading. Continuing, he says, the level of Holy See U.S. cooperation has varied since Ronald Reagan's presidency, depending upon the priorities and values of individual presidents and the particular strategic interests of the United States and the Holy See at each point along the way. Predictably, as the Cold War ended, George H.W. Bush's administration was not as openly engaged with the Vatican as Ronald Reagan's had been. Wrong. George H.W. Bush was a Knight of Malta. George H.W. Bush was an oath-spitting warrior crusader for the Pope. It was only made to appear that George H.W. Bush wasn't working for the Pope when his entire administration was a papal administration. Okay? There hasn't been a Protestant administration, if ever, in the United States of America. Have you ever, listen, let me just ask, some people might be protesting what I just said. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen or have read record of any president of the United States standing up before this country and warning this world about getting in bed with the scarlet harlot of Rome? I never have. Never read an account of it. George H.W. Bush was called Poppy, okay? Not just because he was Grandpa Bush. No. He ran the Pope's drug wars. He ran the Pope's drug trade, rather. Hauling poppies was his business. That's why he became CIA director. That's why they elevated him to CIA director. He ran the Pope's drug trade. That's why they call him Poppy Bush. He was the Pope's drug man. Okay? He says Bill Clinton's engagement was even more attenuated, due both to the other administration priorities and some sharp disagreements with the principle of the Holy See. But Bill Clinton was Jesuit trained all of his life, groomed for the White House by the Jesuits. We'll be back right after the message.
years ahead of the dominant media. FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you'd like to support Inquisition Update, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. And again, we thank Nicholas for providing the airtime and the support of the people for this program, and it's my hope to continue many more years. And if you'd like to contact me directly, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. And my apologies, sometimes for my listeners, I get a bit behind in my email. Wrestling with some physical problems right now, but I'll get back on my feet pretty soon. All right, returning to the book, we've talked about the Clinton administration and how it so faithfully served the papacy so many times on Inquisition Update. I don't want to go into it again. I just encourage my listeners to do their own research on the subject. Bill Clinton was trained by the Jesuits. He served the Jesuits loyally throughout his entire administration and literally led a crusade against Protestants in the United States of America. And one of those were the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, and Tony Alamo Ministries in Fouke, Arkansas. And we'll just leave it go at that. Bill Clinton was very consistent with the papacy. He had some moral problems, as most papists do. We won't go into that either. But certainly, one could not describe Bill Clinton as a Protestant. All right. He says the current administration, regarding the Barack Obama administration, he says the current administration of Barack Obama that's the key word, appears to have little interest in the Holy See. I mean, after all, we can't have a visibly papal president, one right after another. I mean, that might wake up a few Protestants in the country. So occasionally we have to have a president that appears to be Muslim. But appears, remember the word appears is the key word. Okay? Barack Obama takes his orders from the same authority as did Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, and at least every president back to Wilson. Okay? He says the current administration of Barack Obama appears to have little interest in the Holy See. I was fortunate enough to work for a president who, due to an alignment of his principles and values with those of the Catholic Church, as well as the nature of the post 9/11 world, had a very close relationship with the Holy See. He's talking about the George W. Bush administration. George W. Bush was openly papist, never admitting it publicly, but his actions were without doubt papal in their intent. Now he says the 6 visits George W. Bush made during his 8 years to see Pope John Paul II, including the Pope's funeral, and Benedict XVI, he went to see Benedict XVI too, set a record for U.S. presidential visits to the Holy See. Set a record. He says, but even in moments of tension and discord, our mutual beneficial diplomatic ties have allowed the United States and the Holy See to manage differences reasonably and effectively and to move quickly together to leverage and advance shared goals and objectives. So there's what at least the administration of George W. Bush did. It helped to leverage and advance papal goals and objectives. Is that not an admission? Is that not a boast? All right, he says one of the post-Reagan tests of Holy See-U.S. relations rose in 1989 during Operation Just Cause, the American invasion of Panama, when General Manuel Noriega sought and was granted asylum in the Vatican's nunciature in Panama City. Remember, every Roman Catholic institution is legally an asylum. Neither the federal government, state governments, county, local, nobody can cross the threshold of a Roman Catholic institution without permission from the bishop. Its sovereign territory belongs strictly to the Pope. Now, Noriega, knowing he was in trouble with the United States military because he was messing around with the Pope's drug trade, okay, he was cutting the Pope out. He was cutting the CIA out. He was running his own drug business and making competition for the Vatican and the CIA's drug business. So the Pope and the CIA, the Catholics in action at the CIA, had a controversy with Noriega. So what does Noriega do? Seek refuge in a nunciature. He wants the Roman Catholic Church to save him. Turns out he was making war with the Roman Catholic Church's drug trade. All right, look what happens. He says Noriega was trying to avoid the grasp of the American military, which intended to extradite him to the United States and put him on trial for drug trafficking, among other serious charges. Imagine the United States government putting anybody on trial for drug trafficking. The United States government is the greatest trafficker of drugs anywhere in the world, even one of its presidents named Poppy. So you got to know Noriega was cutting out the CIA and the Vatican in the drug trade. That's what the beef was all about. And notice you haven't heard a word about Noriega. No, he's a man that knows too much. If Noriega ever surfaces and he musters up the courage and the testosterone to tell what that was all about, he's going to tell you. He could tell you just how involved the United States government and the Vatican together are in the global trade of drugs in this world. That's why they've deep-sixed him. You'll never hear from Manuel Noriega again so long as he is a threat to the Pope's drug trade. All right? Noriega was trying to avoid the grasp of the American military, which intended to extradite him to the United States and put him on trial for drug trafficking, among other serious charges. Like other embassies, the nunciature, see, here's an admission, the nunciature is an embassy. The nunciature enjoyed diplomatic immunity and was therefore off limits to U.S. troops. Okay? U.S. troops can't go into the sacred sanctity of the Holy Roman Empire, or they could get smacked by the Pope. The militaries of the world tremble at the power of the Pope. The papacy overthrew the Soviet Union. Okay? Our government recognizes the sovereignty and sanctity of the Roman Catholic Church and wouldn't dare tread 1 foot upon that nunciature to get Noriega. Are you comprehending now the power of the Pope over the government of the United States? He says the nuncio to Panama, a Spanish Monsignor named Jose Sebastian Laboa, had no time to consult the Vatican in the tumult of events, so he alone made the controversial decision to admit Noriega and several of his cohorts into the nunciature. Okay? Just like the Mexicans do when they cross the southern border of the United States, the Roman Catholic Mexican invaders to this country immediately seek asylum in the Roman Catholic churches in the South. The cops can't come after them there. The priests have complete control. The Roman Catholic priests have complete control and sanctuary for the Roman Catholic invaders coming across the southern border. The Roman Catholic churches have the same asylum, the same diplomatic immunity as the nunciature in Panama. This is why the government can't close the border, or won't. Okay? He says Monsignor Laboa had no affection for Noriega. Well, obviously he wouldn't. Noriega was cutting the Roman Catholic Church out of the drug trade. Monsignor Laboa had no affection for Noriega, who had become a corrupt quasi-dictator and had never been a friend of the Roman Catholic Church nor of human rights, but the nuncio believed that allowing the Panamanian strongman into the nunciature might prevent further bloodshed in the streets of Panama. I wonder if Noriega realizes to this day that he sought refuge in a Roman Catholic nunciature, the very institution that he offended by running his own drug trade. He just thought he was seeking asylum, but he handed himself right over to the supreme authority over his life. It's just, when he entered the nunciature, it was just like entering the jail. He put himself in jail against the one who sought him the most, the Roman Catholic Church. He says, furthermore, granting asylum was in keeping with the church policy and international norms. Granting asylum, that's what the Roman Catholic Church did in World War II, didn't it? Granted asylum of all the Nazi leadership, hustled them off to Argentina, Roman Catholic Argentina. Oh, by the way, the man who spoke and he is just a man, trust me. He sits on a pot just like you and me. And the very man that spoke behind the pulpit there in Congress used to be the man of all men in Argentina. a Jesuit superior. Arguably the most powerful man in Argentina. And there was a duly elected government at that time that was overthrown by a military junta. Okay? What was the reason for the overthrow? Well, the duly elected government of Argentina had come across the documents that outlined the influence of the Roman Catholic Church during World War II and its asylums that it granted to Nazi atrocities and Nazi leaders, and how they brought them to Argentina for protection from world authorities. Those records were about to be exposed to the whole world by that legitimate government. And the man who spoke behind the pulpit, and I call it a pulpit because that's what it was in Congress, was the man who supported that military junta that overthrew the legitimate government of Argentina. And what was the result? Those documents were never revealed. You know, you want to hear some irony? The world thinks this Pope is a liberal. He's come out with all kinds of liberal tenets in his speeches and encyclicals. But he protected the fascist regime of Nazi Germany that sought refuge in Argentina. You know, the guy has gone from extreme right wing to extreme left wing in just that quick. All he had to do is become Pope. Can you trust the Roman Catholic Church? Okay. This man that spoke behind the pulpit in Congress yesterday, is a global class criminal. A biblical style criminal. And the world would pursue him and put him in jail and make him answer for all his crimes were it not for the power of the Roman Catholic Church. That's what happens when you become a Roman Catholic country, as did Argentina, and as has the United States of America. Biblical class criminals go free, and they become the leaders of the world. He says, furthermore, granting asylum, we're back to Noriega now, granting asylum was in keeping with the church policy, the Roman Catholic Church policy, and international norms. As Father Robert Graham, S.J., the Jesuit priest, explained to newspaper reporters, granting asylum, especially in Latin America, was in no way equivalent to granting residence to a refugee. Quote, "It's a question of Latin American diplomatic norms, not of Vatican policies and procedure. This is simply a device to grant temporary haven while a person's status is negotiated," unquote. What this really means is it's a chance for the Vatican to assess the situation and make its own judgments. That's what asylum's about. You know, it's sold to us as an instrument whereby one who is charged with a crime can seek temporary protection so that the vigilantes can't exercise their own judgment and give the accused a fair trial. Okay? Where both sides are represented. But that's not at all what it is. It's a chance for the Vatican to take control of the situation and manage the affairs. Noriega sought refuge in this nuncio, and they granted him asylum and then managed the outcome of the confrontation with the United States of America. He says this is simply a device to grant temporary haven while a person's status is negotiated. You can better believe there was a lot of negotiation going on between the Holy See, the quote-unquote Holy See, and the United States government. He says, Father Graham's assurances notwithstanding, the United States government's reaction was very negative when Noriega and henchmen entered the nuncio on Christmas Eve, 1989. I'll let you figure out why Noriega chose Christmas Eve to enter a nuncio. Okay? Thomas Milady was the United States ambassador to the Holy See at the time. He learned of Noriega's entry into the nunciature that Christmas Eve in a phone call from the U.S. State Department Operations Center. Quote, my instructions were clear, he writes of that phone call. The United States government did not want the Holy See to grant asylum in the nunciature to Noriega, unquote. Later in the evening, dressed in his formal best, Ambassador Milady made his way to St. Peter's Basilica to attend the Pope's midnight Mass. They always have a midnight Mass at Christmas time. They think it's holy. He sent a note across the nave to Cardinal Secretary of State Casaroli requiring a meeting directly after the Mass. As the audience filed out of St. Peter's that Christmas morning at 2 a.m., the two men conferred in the Basilica. Ambassador Milady spelled out the American position, which was that Noriega was a criminal and not worthy of asylum. Later, to support the American case, he gave the Vatican a full copy of the U.S. indictment against Noriega, which may have brought the Pope and his advisors into closer sympathy with the American objectives. Listen, the American government and the papacy had the same objectives, okay? We got to stop this man. We got to cover up the real reason why we're taking him into custody. How are we going to do this? There's your negotiation between the United States and the papacy. The man that they both sought just thought the Roman Catholic Church would be an asylum for him, when in fact he fell right into the hands of those who were pursuing him. And of course, the United States military, maintaining the sovereignty of the Roman Catholic Church, stayed out of the nunciature. It all looked really good on paper, didn't it? Nobody ever caught on the United States and the Vatican were working together against Noriega. Noriega surrendered without realizing it, thought he was getting protection from the Roman Catholic Church. He fell right into the trap. See, this is what happens when you don't understand the role of the papacy and the alliance between the papacy and the United States of America. You can end up seeking refuge in their prison. Rome can't be trusted. And to the degree that the United States government is cooperating with the Vatican, it cannot be trusted. He says, look, don't anybody say that I'm rooting for Noriega here. I'm exposing this charade. And then directing your attention to the implications of a Vatican-U.S. relationship. That's the point of all this. He says also he had recently discussed the global drug menace with the Holy See, ensuring that officials in the Secretary of State's office knew just how serious and harmful were Noriega's activities. You better believe they were serious and harmful, both to the CIA's drug traffic, which is the Pope's drug traffic. That's how they finance their black budgets. That's how they finance their Jesuit budgets. That's how they foment war. The money, the proceeds from the drug trade is how they fight their dirty papal wars, conquering the rest of the world for the Pope, commensurate with the surrender of the Protestants at Vatican Council II. They've got a political mandate. They can do anything they want. Manuel Noriega was just a dime store drug peddler, but he was, the Vatican and the United States had to put up the front that they're opposed to drug trade, and it worked. The American people bought it hook, line, and sinker. Just like they always do. He says there's nothing like prior cooperation to lay the foundation for new cooperation. There's nothing like prior cooperation to lay the foundation for new cooperation. I wonder what old cooperation, prior cooperation, are relying upon for the new cooperation that appeared last night, or yesterday rather, from the podium, the pulpit in Congress, with the man of sin, the son of perdition, spouting his almost childlike sermon. The world's going to buy it. The whole world is deceived about what this Pope represents. And also about what the United States government represents. I hope before I die, I begin to see people wake up. But if not, that they wake up anyway. He says, though he followed State Department orders and worked to convince the Vatican to expel Noriega, Ambassador Milady warned the State Department not to expect immediate action. The Pope, he explained, would go slow and do nothing that might create an impression that the Vatican had caved under American pressure. No, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords must always maintain the appearance that he is never subject to any government but his own. Roman Catholic canon law. King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is judge of every man, and no man may judge him. No entity in heaven and earth may instruct the papacy. The papacy is sovereign. It does what it will on its own time schedule for its own purposes, and the world must simply accommodate. The papacy is, as it were, Christ on earth. Oh, by the way, did you hear so many references of Pope Francis I, Jorge Bergoglio, talk about dialogue? Got to have dialogue. If the papacy thinks itself to be literally Christ on earth, imagine yourself having dialogue with Jesus Christ. What would that dialogue entail? Is there such a thing as dialogue with Jesus, negotiation with Jesus, working out differences with Jesus? Or do you simply listen and do what he says? That's what dialogue means to the papacy. You simply do what the Vicar of Christ says. We'll talk about it, but you will eventually do what the man of sin says. That's what dialogue really means from this Pope. I've run out of time. I could go on all day, but my voice would fail me, so we'll pick up next time on Inquisition Update. I've been your host, Tom Fress, and blessed to be here. We'll see you next time.